Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Line Change, the NHL betting podcast from the Action Network. My name is Michael Leboff, and joining me for this, our Thursday episode, to look ahead to a 10-game slate are Tim Kalinowski and Nick Martin. On a slate like this, we got to start with our favorite underdogs, and on a slate like this, we have to start with the Islanders and Montreal Canadiens on Long Island. Big win for the Islanders against the Rangers. With me and my brother in the building. I don't think the two of us took a breath that entire third period. But we can get into that later. The Habs are plus 180 coming off of a pantsing of the Philadelphia Flyers. It was a final 9-2. Montreal
Nine
now trap
three, nine
9
three.
3.
We
Sorry.
pushed. Nick
Yep,
pushed
that's
his
Don't
team
forget
total.
that third
that's right.
goal. That was
Yes.
massive for me.
Uh, and now the Habs travel as a plus 180 underdog to take on the Isles, who are minus 218. The total here is 6. Uh, It used to be before the Islanders got, kind of unstable footing. I used to go to a ton of games at Nassau Coliseum for basically just walking. And every time they played the Habs, they would bus in, tons and tons of Canadiens fans. They were always my favorite games to go to because it was so much fun, electric atmosphere. So I'll be there again Thursday night. It won't be like that though. It should be a pretty raucous atmosphere in the other way as the Islanders look to all but wrap up a playoff berth if they can get 2 points. Nick, but you're going the other way.
Yeah, I like the Canadiens. I still just think the Islanders' offensive upside is a little too capped for me to see this number. I think it's pretty long. Um, Not really banking that much on the Flyers game for Montreal. I don't even really know what to think of all that, but they've still got a top line in dominant form. I think if you're going to get Montembeault here, plus 180 is worth half a unit. And then the other thing that I think we got to sprinkle a quarter of a unit on. The tie is plus 370. I want to go right back to it after missing in that Rangers game. You guys know I was pissed about the finish of that Rangers game, not because we lost the tie, Mike, but because that under beat too.
Yep.
But it just looks like and the reason I say that is because I thought that the penalty was obvious and that penalty would have left 12 seconds on the clock for the puck to drop and chances are nothing would have happened. So anyways, that's a beef for another day. But the point remains the same. I think the Islanders are really susceptible to playing the same game over and over. I do think it's a legitimate, sustainable thing that if they get leads, they shut down. They just try to chip pucks out. They get way too much into a shell. Maybe that doesn't happen as much with Montreal. And obviously, we hope that the Canadiens could hold a lead, or I do. Mike doesn't, but so yeah, I think the tie is in play, and I think the Habs are too long at plus 180. They're playing respectable hockey, and the Islanders still look like a team that's a little flat offensively. They're still ranking in the bottom half of the league in terms of chances created over the last month. I think that's kind of just a fair take on what they are. So obviously the Islanders deserve to be a favorite here, but it feels like a pretty huge number in what's going to be a pretty competitive game. Kind of similar to the Hawks game last week
Yep.
too. I feel like it's just the same thing. I'll happily go back to it.
Yeah. Yeah, Tim, you'll save your thoughts here to the end of the show, but I'm with you. I jotted down the overtime as my favorite bet in this game. I wrote up a preview for the Islander Ranger game for the New York Post, and I said the overtime is going to be a live look there. Um, no matter who the Islanders are playing, like you look at them, they're a team that can play up pretty well right now because of their defensive upside of their goaltending, and they're also a team that can play down because, like you said, their offensive upside is severely limited. And I just wanted to bring that. I made that point about my brother and I watching this game in the third period and not taking a breath like at all the entire time. It was because the Islanders were just sitting back the whole time and they didn't get a shot and goal until midway through the third. They got a penalty called in their favor to take some of the pressure out. But once that penalty ended, it was right back into their own zone. So it's just a team that as much as Patrick Waugh tries to instill in them to not play like that, they keep reverting back to it. And just, I think just who they are at this point, especially when it's not the worst case scenario to play in that way in the big picture of just trying to scratch out a playoff berth. So I do think that the overtime look would be my favorite bet in this one. Uh, and then of course Casey Cizikas anytime goal scorer. We still have a chance to get out ahead of that as long as he's playing with Horvat Barzell and on that first power play unit, which is hilarious.
I thought
Um,
he tipped that one in when I was
I
watching
know,
it live.
but
I
it's all
was
right.
I
I
was
did.
already ready for the text
I
from you.
had I had Mike Riley first goal scorer in that, so that was just a bet I placed on my way walking into the building. So that was quite quite fun. Because I thought it was tip two, and then they, when they announced the goal, I was like, oh, they're gonna change it, and then someone was like, no, that was Lindgren. So, thank you to Mike Riley. My favorite underdog for this slate is the Ottawa Senators. They are plus 170 playing the Tampa Bay Lightning. This one in Tampa. The Sens, they they're just a team that I'm gonna want to back at this price, even with their season being long over. The Lightning have very little to play for. I think John Cooper has tipped his hand a bit in terms of resting players. He said it after their game a couple nights ago that if guys are banged up even a little bit, that they will be pretty cautious with playing them. I don't know who the goalie will be here, but I don't think that this is the worst time to give Andrei Vasilevsky a night off either. And so that could be a situation to keep in mind. And it's the Senators. We know that they have the talent and the upside to give any team a game at this kind of price. So I'll take a shot at plus 170 here, Tim.
Yeah, I don't really mind it. I'm kind of just in a mentality here where I've had a kind of enough of Ottawa. I don't need to add one more notch to the belt of a heartbreaking loss and outplaying a team 5-on-5. But I will say in this game, you alluded to guys being in and out of the lineup if they're banged up. But Tampa Bay, guess what? They have the best power play in the league. Ottawa has the fourth worst kill in the league, just off of percentage. Guess who has the most power play points? Nikita Kucherov. So I will be on some sort of player who's on the power play in that game to record a power play point. That's something I learned from Nick. If you want to take a guy to is over on points or whatever, and you don't like it, just go take it on the power play. And this is obviously pretty much anyone's a good matchup for the Lightning power play.
Yeah, I agree. And like Mike said, I do really feel like this looks like a logical spot not to start Johansson, or not to start Vasilevsky, which I'll get into more with my best bet. But I definitely wouldn't be betting the Lightning early because I think there's a pretty reasonable chance with that. On the other side of things, too, like with the Lightning resting guys, I really only care if they rest Point, Kucherov, or Hedman. And Stamkos has been red hot too,
Yeah.
but I feel like we'll see. It would need some kind of combination.
No
I
love,
don't hate
no
the
love
take
for
on.
Luke Glendening.
Yeah,
Is it Adam or Luke? Who's even in the
Luke.
league anymore? One of the
Luke.
Glendenings is still around.
Yeah, and I do think you could take the super long shot on the Sens and the over too. And yeah, Tim, like you said, with the Sens penalty kill, there's no harder spot to hide bad goaltending than on the penalty kill because you're gonna give up some reasonable chances where guys get to pick their spot. So I feel like it is what it is when you're the Ottawa Senators trying to, not give up a goal in the first two shots every night always seems to prove impossible. So I think the Sens looks reasonable, even though I'm pretty over betting them this year, and I like the over
Come
here.
on, there's only a couple more chances.
I've said that too many times, Mike.
We can do the same thing next year, Mike. We'll
That's
be
true.
doing the same thing.
All right, Tim, you can wrap up this segment with another underdog that we just love.
Yeah, I really wanted to tag along to Nick's Habs play. I actually wrote it first in our rundown, but then I'm a good guy, and so I gave it to him because talk about not getting many opportunities to back a certain team. How about the San Jose Sharks? They will once again be a big underdog against the now Seattle Kraken. I guess for me, I think I don't know if you guys were, probably Lieboff was on San Jose last night, Tuesday night against Calgary. That one, they lose in overtime. Like teams like Seattle and Calgary playing San Jose, I just can't not take a chance on San Jose. I just think that the number is pretty long. And yeah, guys, we're playing out the string here too. You only get so many times to back the San Jose Sharks, who have also beaten the Kraken this year, once 2-0. And one of their losses to the Kraken was 4-2, and it was an empty net goal. So, you tell me, I don't think Seattle has the easy goal scoring to just put them away and, have a point night or something like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I am with you on the Sharks here. I do think that I was more encouraged than discouraged with the performance against the Flames. And I think that like we talked about, we probably make too big a deal, but you have to mention it, and it's fun fodder to talk about motivational angles, and we're not just gonna sit here and I'm gonna drill down on numbers and then move on to the next game. And I do think that the Sharks will want to eclipse the 48 point mark that the uh, Colorado Avalanche had in the, I think that's the worst mark in the salary cap era in a full season. They're 3 points shy of it right now, so they'll need 2 wins to get by it, or some sort of couple wins and overtime losses. They have another crack at the Flames. The other two games, besides this Kraken one, are a little tougher. A Wild game, which probably be back on the Sharks on that one, and then the Oilers. So this is a good opportunity to at least build towards that. And yeah, like the Kraken just aren't good enough, and there's not enough at stake here for them to be like, I'm happy to play this number, Nick.
No, I'm not. I'm not going to bet the Kraken, but I'm a little more afraid of it than you guys are. I think the Sharks are clear bottom. I was with Mike in losing on them the other night, but I also think that's a take on what I think of Calgary versus Seattle right now. And Seattle really did play quite well again versus Arizona. It feels like they kind of have steadily shown some bounce back here. So I'm a little indifferent on this one.
And I'll just throw one more caveat here for someone that maybe listens to our podcast for the first time and they're like, oh, this idiot just gave me technically a best bet on the Sharks. Listen, it's an underdog. You got to pick an underdog. I don't unload on these underdogs. It's a half unit, quarter unit, 10 o'clock game sitting on my couch. Give me a break here.
That's right. That's why it is in the underdog section of our show, which is now concluded with the Montreal Canadiens, San Jose Sharks, and Ottawa Senators as our picks. And we move on to the big board. Let's go to South Florida to talk about the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are playing the Florida Panthers. Blue Jackets plus 285, Panthers minus 360. Total here is 6.5. Nick, you're the only one with any real conviction on this one.
I had a lot of conviction at the opening spread of minus 130 to back the Panthers. I thought that was pretty short. And it's still at minus 138 at the time of recording, so I would be playing down to minus 140. I just think that the gap between these teams right now is just humongous. I like the spread in the Tampa game, and I think much, much less of the Lightning compared to the Panthers. And it feels like the Panthers are starting to get right over the last couple games here. So I kind of want to just keep buying them trending upwards and heading into the postseason with more of the dominant form we've kind of seen all year. They're still putting some pressure in the division. It's not quite over yet. So I feel like they will, roll all their guys here and be up for this one. And really just nothing going on with the Blue Jackets makes me think they can handle the pressure that the Panthers are going to put on them all game here. And their offensive upside is it is so hurt right now with how dinged up the roster is. So been playing really the best version they possibly can of all their games recently, and they're still not covering the spread very often versus elite teams. So I look at like that Carolina game. It felt like the Blue Jackets competed respectably, I suppose. Then again, you still lose 3-0. Same kind of thing the next night in Tampa, lost by 2 to the Isles last week. Like I just feel like this team they are a bottom feeder that is pretty well below about 26 teams in the league right now. So I want to keep fading the Blue Jackets. We'll see where this number goes. We've talked a lot about how some of these ones where it's like an absolute top team versus a lottery team are the ones that have the most line movement. And it seems like odds makers have the toughest time setting them right. And I should throw in too, like last month, the Blue Jackets had that road trip where they just got absolutely slapped in 3 of the 4 games. So I think the bottom's fallen out in Columbus. To me, it feels like pretty good chance the Panthers just blow the doors right off them here. I also wouldn't hate like taking a chance on Panthers 3.5, 4, whatever as part of my bet as well.
Yeah, we talked up Florida so much this year, and then they go through that tough run, and I still like them, but I don't have as much conviction on them. It just seems pretty juicy for a team that also too is pretty much locked into their matchup with the Leafs. I have to see it to believe it, and I'm not going to go firing on the Panthers and late in the season when I still kind of have I need to see them get really right before I feel good again, and that's probably why it's gambling. I think though, Nick, you bring up a good point. I'd rather take a shot on one of those 2.5s or 3.5s with a plus money payout just to because if that's the avenue, like that's definitely definitely a very plausible avenue is a blowout.
Yeah, and I think the Blue Jackets have covered the spread on the road once twice since the start of February. So, oh no, sorry, three times, but two of them are the Ducks and the Sharks. So it really has been pretty horrible when they actually have to play good teams. And I feel like at this point, I just kind of want to bank on that.
Uh, there's a couple big games on the schedule, but I think this one is my favorite to handicap by a large margin. That's the Flyers and Rangers. Philadelphia is plus 170 at the Garden. Rangers are minus 205. The total here is 5.5. What on earth is going on with the Philadelphia Flyers? Like, I guess we have an idea of what's going on. It's like the team is not getting saves, and maybe the coach is wearing thin, and they're not as good as their record showed with, or I shouldn't say that. They're not as good anymore. That now that they traded away Sean Walker, and they've been dealing with some injuries and whatever, so the bottom's falling out. But I did not expect it to be like this at all. I also want to bring up the fact, like, these two teams played like right at the end of March, correct? And the final score at it was one of the first games of this long losing streak, and we were giving the Flyers a ton of credit for the way that they had kind of navigated a really tough part of the schedule. They're getting points against the Rangers, they're getting points against the Bruins, they're getting points against they're like putting up good effort against the Maple Leafs or whatever, and then the wheels have absolutely just come unglued, and it's been a disaster since. I think plus 170, like, this is the worst of it for Philadelphia. And I know that sounds obvious to say, and you'd have to imagine at some point Sam Ersson, I said this before the game against the Canadiens, like, I would absolutely call up Peterson or Felix Sandstrom, even if you don't think they're as good a goalie as Sam Ersson, like, long term. They're gonna they should play better than what we're getting from him and Fedotov. So I how I guess Nick, talk me out of playing the Flyers here at plus 170. It really, especially with like the letdown spot for the Rangers. It's a sandwich spot too. Like, they got the Islanders coming up Saturday afternoon again at the Garden, and that game's going to be crazy. Like, why would I not bet the Flyers here?
Yeah, I can't do it. I really think, I mean, the case for them, you look at their like losing streak here, they've shot 7% and they're getting an 815 save percentage, but also I think the numbers do go a little bit out the window. I've been, seeing people making that comment on Twitter, and I do agree, because like the Montreal game, the numbers look somewhat respectable, but that was clearly just a pathetic effort, and they quit really bad once it was 2-0. Same thing in Columbus. So I don't know. I think maybe they're due to score more goals, but it also feels like the floor is falling out. I don't really want to bet on it. I think, like, the thing is, I feel like you can only go so far down the line of just betting players to figure it out because they want to try harder and they've been embarrassed. And those, like, all those narratives do apply to Philly here. They also applied after losing 6-1 in Columbus on Saturday night. I was really grateful to just get a push on my Flyers to score over 3 goals bet, because obviously that game was very pathetic, and I was already kind of thinking about how embarrassing that was to have touted that. So I just can't do it with the Flyers right now. It feels like they're very hard to touch. I do like the game total to go over over 5.5 though. I thought that this looked like a weird spot so there's still 5.5 at minus 132 out there. I would play to minus 135. We'll see if that holds up. It seems kind of insane to me to like, first off, the Rangers offensive upside is pretty legitimate. You give them an inch, they'll take a mile. It feels like it's pretty unlikely that they're going to get goalied and not find a way to convert their chances. If they get a reasonable amount. And I just feel like right now it seems like such a reach to think that the Flyers will get much in the way of goaltending. The Rangers still aren't the most dominant defensive side. So for me, that just looked pretty short. It feels like something like 4-2 Rangers, 5-2 Rangers is really possible, but I also wouldn't be surprised to just see, the Flyers break out and find some offense of their own. So I thought that looked quite low, and I think it's actually a reasonable spot if you wanted to target some sort of crazy storyline like we saw when they had that 6-5 game that was just nuts 2 weeks ago. I wouldn't hate that either, especially because when you're getting this low of a total, you start to get the super long numbers on even over 7.5 and 8.5. So I don't know. Like I can see your side of it. It wouldn't be shocking to see Philly pull it together. It was kind of crazy how well they played all those good teams, and then it's just been absolutely pathetic when they've gotten to the soft scheduling patch. But it feels like the question marks are kind of correctly accounted for with them at not a humongous price here.
Yeah, I wanted think about if we saw this line, a couple months ago when
They were
Philly
plus
was
150 in this game. They were plus 150
yeah,
when they played. 20 cents right now.
like so there you go. I mean, I do want to say for Philly, I hate all this towards sentiment, like the team is quit on towards this and that. In my opinion, you can just draw a complete line in the sand to like Carter Hart. Like and it's not a matter of to me is like Urson playing poorly or they can't get a save or whatever. Like the guy was just asked to do an awful lot and play an awful lot of games and an awful lot of big games. And I think that I can attribute it more to that of like being out of gas, it looks like,
Yeah.
than totally, what happened to this team. Like to me, being able to roll out Carter Hart and Urson was such a this team doesn't have enough depth and enough easy scoring and things to patch up those types of holes. So with that said, I do like the over 5.5, like Nick said. On open, I thought that was a little head scratching because I mean just based off Philly's goaltending situation alone, that would make you inclined to bet this over. And I mean, God, I was rooting for Philly just because it's just such a fun playoff atmosphere there, and those Philly people are so nuts. And as a Boston guy, I just it's I just adore them so much. So yeah, it sucks. It's more fun when Torts is fiery and in the playoffs and more media. But so yeah, over for me.
Yeah, and I agree with you on the like some of the Torts discourse I think has got a little out of control. People like tying this whole losing streak into him scratching Couturier. When you look and when that originally happened, they had one of their biggest wins of the entire season that night. So I don't know. I mean, maybe they did run out of gas a little bit, and I think part of that has been, that they've fallen flat in some of these games because of the fact that, you don't get a saver too early and then the floor just kind of fell out. I think it's kind of been like a culmination of a lot of factors, but it does feel like Torts has kind of gotten the bad end of things in some of the talk lately, where it's like 3 weeks ago people thought he was a Jimmy Adams candidate, and obviously that the way things has fallen apart is significant, but it does feel a little unfair how much he's wearing it right now.
All right. Let's go to Devils and Leafs next. With New Jersey at plus 160, Leafs minus 192, total of 6.5. Jack Hughes is shut down, so the Devils will travel to Toronto without him. Toronto, I mean, these two just played in Jersey with Toronto on a back-to-back, and they got to win. Nick, is it just as simple as going right back to the Leafs here?
I think it is just as simple as going back to the Leafs. I was happy that in the end we didn't overthink it on the last game, and I think I want to stick with it here. Obviously, it's a longer number with Toronto being in a significantly better spot, but Toronto's really has just played as well as anyone the last stretch. They have the depth that helps in these kind of situations down the stretch. They're 29-13-2 since the start of January, and I think since the All-Star break they might be first or second. So they really have started to just play like one of the best teams in the league. That was pretty much just a firm dummying over the Devils the other night. I think the Devils are really not playing well right now. The blue line is kind of a train wreck, and I don't think they have the bodies to turn it around. And then we've talked about it a lot, but they are not playing better under Travis Green. They're playing worse. And the only reason that I think that fact's not like entirely obviously found out is because they've actually gotten some respectable goaltending. But it feels like the amount of games they have won is kind of the maximum version of things. They're giving up, like they've now trended towards being a pure bottom third team in terms of defensive chances against. And I think at times they were like they weren't as good defensively as their analytics looked because of the way that they could offer soft breakdowns in front of goal and all of that. And now they actually are just in terms of in the bottom third in terms of the raw chances for, but I still think that they're probably worse than those analytics suggest because of the kinds of breakdowns that their blue line offers, if that makes sense. So I'm pretty low on the Devils right now. I don't want to overthink it. And I think if Matthews, he closed at -110 to score the other night, which I thought was insane. I broke down how he'd scored in, so now he scored in 63% of the games since. I can't remember what date I looked at, but it was over half the season. So I think if he's still -120, which would be 10 cents a movement, I would go back to it. And I also would keep my eye on him to be the last goal scorer. You guys were, I was frustrated the other night to miss on this because I do think that they owe it to a guy who's actually a good defensive player to put him out and let him get his empty net cookies. It feels like a thing that people would make fun of for like saying about a Leafs type player, but Matthews has far less empty netters and empty net points than anyone else in the scoring race. And he's just as good a defensive player, if not better. So I
I
think
think
it's
he's
like a
got like
legitimate,
two. He's got like
he
two,
is,
I think.
I think he has 2 empty netters and it was like 4 or 5 empty net points. And some of these guys have like 12. So like Kucherov, it feels like every single night he gets the chance and he stays out there the whole time. So, anyways, I think that the last goal score angle is reasonable because I like the chances that the Leafs are leading and that this time they'll kind of let him do it, especially because it feels inevitable. We're probably going to get in a situation. Oh, and so Matthews is exactly -120 at time recording, so I would bet that to score. Um, but it feels kind of inevitable that he's going to come into like the last game with 69 goals or like, and then they're just going to have some stupid debate and you're going to hear so much about it if he's going to play the game just to hit 70. So if I were, it sounds like a dumb thing to handicap, but I do feel like you just should just put him out there and let him try. It's not like you're going to lose games because you have Matthews on the ice. So anyways, I thought that was a bit of a weird aside in that game. Obviously, I'm partly just mad because I gambled on it, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Nick, well said. I was looking for an angle in this game. Toronto to me, like they've been playing almost too well. Too well for Toronto, the Toronto media, the Toronto narrative. They're almost too confident going into the playoffs here. This just, the roller coaster. I'm waiting for it to dip down again. I think the Hughes news more than anything is just indicative of like the really waving the white flag for this team. And I would be not shocked in the slightest if they just got, absolutely played off the ice. And then the Leafs, the Matthews angle, I like the last goal scorer a lot. I think that's a good way to get at this game, especially we like to watch a lot of Leafs hockey. And I think too, Matthews, you're right. It's been going too well. It's going to be a perfect controversy. They didn't rest Matthews. They that. He's sitting at 69 goals. I think that's the perfect handicap on this game because that's how it's going to go.
Okay, let's move on to the game of the night in terms of stakes, the Wings and Penguins. Detroit is +120 in Pittsburgh. The Penguins are -142. Total here 6.5. Both of these teams are coming off of a loss. Pittsburgh got an overtime point against the Leafs, and the Wings lost 2-1 in a game against Nick's Capitals. And but both played really well in those losses, and both have just been trending in the right direction considerably over the past little while. Sounds obvious to say with the Penguins. Obviously, they're on that crazy point streak right now, 6-1-3 in their last 10, and while Detroit's results are a little more middling, you do have to give them credit for the way they're going. This this feels a little long on Pittsburgh, I would say. Like -142, I think is giving them maybe a little bit too much respect considering the way these teams are going. I know they're at home and they've got the top six going well. It looks like Letang has found some semblance of form on the back end. They're getting better contributions from the bottom pairing guys, like the depth guys on their defense. But I do think the Red Wings are playing well enough to at the very least stick around here. I think that this also is a decent overtime bet. The question I have is like these two teams have very kind of hard to predict. Like goaltending is already hard to predict, but for me, like these are in terms of the teams in the playoffs are around the race. Like I've got no idea what to expect. I know that Delkovich is in good form, but I mean that happens sometimes with these goalies. Him and Alex Lyon, I feel like are similar goalies. They're a little undersized and a lot of times can be moving around, but when they're locked in, they're athletic and kind of hard to figure out and a little unorthodox, so can be frustrating. I'm having a tough time picking a winner here, and that's why I feel like, this thing feels like a pretty good overtime bet, especially with the way Detroit's been playing lately. Much better, much tighter, much tidier, Tim. But you do have a lean here.
Yeah, I lean Pittsburgh. I took it at a smaller price on open. I would only really like it to -140. I really like the way Pittsburgh's looking right now. We joke about it, but Michael Bunting has been a great addition for them. He's playing that kind of a bumper role in the power play. I've been really impressed with Pittsburgh as of late in the way they've been playing, and I just think that Detroit is a little too Jekyll and Hyde for me. Yeah, you could say the same thing about Pittsburgh, but I really like the way that they've been trending lately. And I guess my question, if you don't really want to lay it with Pittsburgh here, I'm staring at Pittsburgh to make playoffs +140. If you think they're going to win this game, that this will, as I look at a model as well, that this would significantly increase their playoff chances, a regulation win. Do you just play that, the make playoffs?
Yeah, I actually don't hate that because I think there is the chance that you could luck out in terms of, I mean, there's a good chance that you could win the Pens game tonight, but you could also see the Caps or Wings. Like the Wings win this one, the Caps lose a ton of games, and Pittsburgh finds it out another way. So I don't really mind that as kind of a double chance when normally I'd probably be done playing those at this point. I'm with you, Tim. I was expecting to like the Pens here. I thought it was just a hair wider than I wanted to go, so I'll pass because I do think it is going to be competitive. That was a really tough loss for the Wings the other night. I don't really think you need to critique too much about it from them. You'd love to see some of the chances finished, but I think that's about all there is. And I do like the tie, Mike, at +360. I feel pretty confident that it's going to be a fairly competitive game, despite the fact that I kind of do lean with the Pens, but +360 feels like a decent shot. And we've talked about this a lot, and I think it continues to prove true that it feels like in these really big spots and in these wild card games where in theory it's really bad for Pittsburgh to let Detroit have any point here, that those have still been the ones that are getting more often than not closer to overtime or going to overtime. I think it's kind of the nature of you're both playing such a sharp batten down game that while it is obviously the worst case to give them a point in any fashion, it does kind of feel like it just happens to lend itself to actually going to overtime. So I don't mind that at all. And obviously this is kind of the game of the night in most people's eyes. So I feel like you want to have some action on it. And why not at +360? I feel like the regulation tie is a pretty solid bet.
I smell a tie round robin coming out of this slate here.
God. Yeah. And the other thing you could do is if you want, you can wait for a team to go down 1-0 and then bet the overtime as well. Okay, so that's Wings and Penguins. We'll save Caps and Sabres for the end of the show. So we'll move to Jets and Stars. Winnipeg +124 in Dallas. The Stars are -148. Total here is 6. I'm happy to pass here, Nick.
I lean towards the Stars. It looks a little short, but it's a little annoying to. I don't know. I still might just do it, but and especially because Ettinger's kind of found his game, but it just feels a little annoying to know that Dallas is just probably going to crumple them and the game might still be close. And I mean, you look at that Preds game. I know that the score line played a role, but the Jets have some concerns right now. I think they can't be excited about how things are looking ahead of a matchup with McKinnon and the Avs because they have some pieces on the back end that are struggling. Pionk has really fallen down or I don't want to say come down to earth because he's been pretty good at times the last couple of years, but he's having a tough go of it. And the third pairing is just also a mess. And I also don't like the way that their top line matches. Like it's so much better when they have Lardy in the mix, but I still don't love the way it matches up versus like a Hintz unit. So the more I think about it, the more I just kind of want to close my eyes and play the Stars at -142. It's pretty short to be getting like a team that I think is just offering advantages all over the ice.
Yeah, I played Dallas at a shorter number, but I would still like the -142. Winnipeg I mean, that Nashville game, Nick, you said it. Even if, I mean, we probably expect Hellerbuck to go again, but the guy just faced like 50 shots against Nashville. And this is a bit of a kind of a tough roadie for Winnipeg here, down to Minnesota, over to Nashville, now back over to Dallas. We know the travel in the Central Division can be tough. So, and I just think Dallas is kind of a more advanced version of Winnipeg. Like Winnipeg is almost like Dallas light in terms of no, like, I guess, like legit superstar in the forward group, and they need good goaltending. So I just think that that matchup is, like you said, Nick, is going to be tough for the Winnipeg D, the way that Dallas Stars forwards can come at you. I think it's a pretty big edge in this game. And I don't think it's being quite accounted for with the travel, home ice, and just Dallas being a little bit better.
Okay, we can then wrap up with a game that I've got no interest in terms of both as just like a casual fan and a better. That's Flames and Kings. Calgary plus 160, Flames minus 192. Total here is 6. We talked about this Flames team quite a bit, probably more than we should have, considering their kind of impact on the league overall. The Kings, meanwhile, I feel like they've just steadily continued their trajectory of being a team that they're not going to set the world on fire, but are holding on to that 3 seed in the Pacific. Whether you want to finish there or not is up for debate. So there's that, but I got no reason to get involved here at all, Nick.
I had nothing either. The price just looks fair to me here. It should obviously be a marks from start. The Kings have still kind of shown that they can have a tough time generating offense in some of these games. So it feels like minus 192 is just a pretty accurate account of the game.
Yeah, I kind of feel similar. I was looking just to continue to fade Calgary, Nick, but I don't really want to lay this number. And LA hasn't been great at covering puck lines as a favorite either. So not excited about that. I will say it's funny. This LA team feels like, we mentioned with Boston, how they seem to be getting unfairly nitpicked. I think this LA team, I've heard like the least amount of, you can kind of draw a path for every team in the playoffs, right? And we feel like it's pretty wide open. I feel like the Kings have had the least amount of like convincing paths drawn out for them, and someone beating the drum, being like, no, the Kings, like if this happens, they'll be okay. Maybe it's just because they're in LA. I don't know, but I feel like that's kind of been the vibe.
I still think they're going to be a really, really damn annoying out. Like, I don't know
Right,
if
I agree, but
picking them, but right now it feels like they're having a hard time figuring some stuff out, though. Like, I feel like they got to find a way to get Fiala more involved. I know I always lean to liking him, but he just feels like that one dynamic piece on their team that it's like, if I don't know about having him on like the third line and in minutes with like Trevor Lewis and stuff. It's just, you guys know I hate when coaches do that stuff, but I do think it's fair. And then the other thing, I don't really get the England usage, so I don't know. I think if they like everything clicks on their roster, they really don't have too notable of holes, and they're going to still be an annoying out in the playoffs. But I think all of those kind of reasons we just talked about is also why you're probably not loving betting them at minus 192.
All right, that brings us to best bets. Let's start with the Capitals and Sabres, since that's the only one we haven't talked about of these 3 yet. And it's a huge game, of course, for Knicks Caps. They're between plus 115 and plus 120 at the time of recording. Sabres minus 135. Total here's 6. They played a little while ago, less than a week ago, or just about a week ago. We had a similar conversation at a similar price that it felt like a sucker's bet, and it was a sucker's bet on the Capitals, but I'm happy to do it again because I think that this team has the ability against other middling teams. Like Charlie Lindgren is going to be even with the way like UPL and Levi have kind of found their form over the course of the second half. Like I still think that Lindgren can give them a chance at at this kind of matchup, right? I'm not asking him to go out there and stone the Lightning or the Rangers or anyone like that for 60 minutes. I'm just asking him to put together a pretty decent performance here against a Sabres team that could just be there's a chance they could come out flat. I just think there's way too many Sabres variables that I've got no problem backing the Caps here. I know that the performance against the Red Wings was not very good. Like I'm not, so me and Nick we're on either side of that matchup, and I thought that the Capitals could punch up. He thought the Red Wings looked like a decent bet. He was probably right, even though he lost the bet. No, he was right, even though he lost the bet. And we could see another situation here, but like that. But I just think that as an underdog, even on the road here, I think Nick, your Caps should be full value in the spot.
Yeah, I don't hate it. Like I can see the logic in like getting better than even money here. Maybe they're going to bounce back. The thing that scares me is at the end of the day, I think this is just the number with the rosters that are on hand for these teams, given that Buffalo has like, numerous offensive pieces in pretty good form. Their defensive play has still been a bit of a flaw, and they kind of had the complete season-ending game in Dallas the other night. So I feel like I can see the parts of it with how maybe Dallas lets down and the Caps have their avenues to hang around. But I also feel like I don't know. I'm unconvinced. I
Yeah.
Buffalo
Yeah, it's
really.
one of those situations where if these two teams are playing 82 times, you might say, yeah, the number looks right. But in this, when you add in all the context here, I actually really like the Capitals. Because
I
I
think
think,
that's fair. I
yeah,
mean, they'll punch up and make it scrappy. I would definitely agree. I will be quite surprised if this looks like the game that we saw between these teams last week. I sure hope not, because that was pretty pathetic. But yeah, I don't mind it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, this feels like, again, Buffalo has been in the spot. It feels like half a dozen times in the last couple of weeks of like, we think that not a mispriced, but you're like, oh, it's a little jarring to see them as a favorite with a team that, must win and all that sort of stuff, and a team that's in the playoff hunt. In the books are clearly making a statement of like, hey, we think this team's better. And again, I think a lot of casuals would be kind of shocked to see that. So I am always a bit trepidatious about being on the side of the team that must win. I do think though that the Capitals have punch up ish potential here, and if I had to bet on this game, I would bet the Capital. I'd bet the dog, right? Because I just feel like it's gonna be a very 50-50 type game. I took the under at open at 6.5. It's probably no longer out there, and so that's just a message to people. If you got no life like us, you're sitting at work, lines drop around 12 o'clock noon on the East Coast. Open up the books and just see what's trickling out there.
I don't mind keeping it square with Obi to score at plus 135 either. I feel like I'm gonna end up playing that for like a half unit. It's you look at like he's completely found his game. And earlier on in the year, we didn't tout him to score once. I think that was pretty good because you could just clearly see that it wasn't there. And now it feels like the opposite. He's scoring nearly every night. It feels like he's just his former self dragging them into the team. It's pretty much
One trip
him.
to Dubai, man. One trip to Dubai
Yeah, I don't.
could fix everything. We won't go into it, but one trip to
I was
Dubai.
gonna say
Um,
whatever he got, I want it once I hit
yeah,
age 38. So
I really wonder what the odds you could have got on him to score 30 goals this season back on like February 1st would have been. They would
But
have been.
on that Fantasy on Ice podcast, Nick and Pete asked me if I thought he would go over 21.5 goals was the line they said. I think it was like on January 1st. And I'm happy to say that I did say he would go over it, but I think I said I thought he would finish on like 24 or 25. So,
Jeez,
you know,
good call.
pretty insane run.
Okay. Tim, that brings us to yours. We already gave our thoughts on Habs and Isles, so you can join in now.
Yeah, I guess we're waiting on me. I said it earlier that I wanted that to be my underdog, but Nick had penciled it in. So you know what I did? I just copy and paste and put it to my best bet instead. I truthfully, leave off. I'm sorry. I was going to bet this number in Montreal, no matter what it was, because I don't know if there's a team that plays more to their opponent than the New York Islanders. And it feels like in football or college football, we see this sometimes, like, this team, a team that squeaks out a lot of close wins. And we're like, oh, they just know how to win. And then there's that team that beats everybody by 70. And it's like, oh yeah, maybe they were actually pretty good. The Islanders, it's like, they don't really blow anyone out. They just, every game they make you sweat. And I guess you could attest to that. You've probably gone through a lot of t-shirts at the Coliseum this year or at Belmont. And this Montreal team, Nick was on it from last couple of weeks. They've punched up. They're 5-5 in their last 10. If you've been betting Montreal, you're plus money because they're pretty much a dog in all those games.
Yeah, I agree. And it feels like we've gone into this, but it
Yeah.
does just feel I don't think the Islanders are playing bad, but it feels like a great time to fade them on this 5-game win streak where their greatest strength has just I mean, first off, they've beaten some horrible teams. They beat the Hawks, they beat the Blue Jackets, they beat Nashville in what was like a solid effort, but I still think overall that game would kind of show you why the Owls are still going to be well, like just playing those types of games versus everyone, even in Montreal. So, and I mean, when you got Mike signing off on it, I think he sees the way it is. It's not like
Yeah.
a knock on the Islanders, but this is what they are. They look like the Islanders of old,
Yeah.
really. And
It's great.
and
I'm happy to
obviously,
have him back. It was there's nothing that brings me greater joy than being in the barn cheering the Islanders just dumping a puck, getting to the red line and getting a puck deep, and the whole crowd is into it. It's something that we've done for years now, because we get to take a deep breath. All right, so that's the Habs for Tim and Nick. You can close out the show with your favorite bet.
yeah, I'm gonna go. We alluded to it, and I hope the numbers hold up tomorrow. I think they will because there's actually some books out there with better than what I'm about to state, which is the over in the Sens and the Lightning game. Over 6.5 is at -110. We haven't seen too many over 6.5s move a lot down the stretch here, and I don't think this is one of them. So I'm comfortable locking it in now, and I would play this price if it's Vasilevsky, but that obviously works to the point where if you're going to lock it in now and you're comfortable with it when that's the Vasilevsky number, then you're pumped if it is the Matt Tompkins number or maybe Jonas Johansson number. And I did think that if it is Tompkins specifically, he was still pretty shaky in that Montreal game that the Lightning won. I mean, they won 7-4, so it's not like it's that hard to make that case. But like I said ahead of that game, I just think that he's a clear notch below like a standard NHL backup, even. So you just want to fade it. And then you look at the Senators side of things. Their offense takes a bit of a hit with Stützle out, but it's still that's their greatest strength. It's always going to be their greatest strength. And even for Shabbat and Sanderson on the back end, that's kind of going to be the thing that makes them a slightly better than average NHL side. And I think that they can expose that or, get some offense together versus a Lightning team that hasn't been that great defensively. I know they've had a really good month and shown a lot better on that front, but I still don't think they're like a defensive side that you have to fear entirely, especially if they have Tompkins in goal. And then you look at the Senators side of things. I don't think it's at all hard to make the case that pucks are going to end up in their night, especially if the Stars or the Lightning play their big guns here, which I think they will. I don't know if I feel like it's one of those things teams lean towards solidifying, wrapping up the points, and I haven't heard anything about Point or Kucherov sitting. So those are kind of the main ones I'd be afraid of. Tim talked about how the Lightning's power play is obviously first in the league, and they're matching up versus the Sens kill that has been a nightmare in large due to the goaltending. So I think there's a lot of avenues to this one breaking open. I feel like something like 5-3 is really realistic, and yeah, one more time to get on a Sens over here.
1-0 Lightning inbound.
Yeah. Oh man. All right, well that'll do it for us this week. We will be back though for Saturday on our weekly Power Plays video, where we give out our best bets for that slate, which should be a doozy, starting in the afternoon with another Islanders Rangers game. Hopefully no vicious attacks from Adam Pelech on anybody. I don't know if he's gonna be allowed in the building. The NYPD might get him. But we'll see. But until then, for Tim and Nick, I'm Mike. Thank you for listening, and thank you to our producer Noah for all the hard work on the back end. We will see you on Saturday and then again next week.